Hello, 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 and welcome to the zone. In case we haven't met yet, I'm Claudio, I'm a presentation coach, and this show is where we dive deep into the art of presenting, pitching, and persuading. And today's episode will be all about intentional communication. And I'm absolutely delighted to tackle this topic together with my colleague Martin Barnes, who helps agency owners get an ROI when speaking at conferences and events. And here he is. Martin, welcome to the zone.
Hey, Claudio, so good to be here.
It's fabulous to see your smiling face. I see in the background you have wonderful weather. You're in England right now, right?
Yep, we're in the southwest of England. We are at the tail end of a heat wave, so it is hot.
Yeah.
Not quite as hot as Thailand, Southeast Asia, or China, but it's nice. Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Martin, we are up for an engaging 30-minute conversation here. I really, really look forward to it. And the topic that you suggested was intentional communications. Now, what does that mean to you?
So I've started using this expression, intentional communication, because for so many years, I specialized in presentations back in 2012. And for the last, 13 years, whenever I talk about public speaking, pitching, presenting, those three P's, I always see a trigger reaction in the audience that I'm talking to, whether it's one on one or a group or at an event. And I see this sort of deflated, because if you say pitch, people go, oh, it's a bit salesy, a bit pushy. I don't want to sell something like that. I'm not a car salesman. And then you go presentation, and people are like, do I need to come to another one? And then public speaking just has so much sort of anxiety. People sort of go, I don't want to be the center of attention with nowhere to hide, vulnerable on stage, being analyzed and assessed on every word. And so I found those three expressions really problematic and tiring, and they roll me back to the bottom of the hill, and I've got to get people back up to the top. And so I've sort of said, hang on, we're not pitching all the time. We're not presenting all the time. We're not public speaking all the time, but we are communicating. And we need to bring a mindset of intent. And that to me is knowing your goals and knowing your audience. And then when you know those two things, you can select and curate of everything you possibly could share, what is the most relevant for this context and this moment. I share that with intention, and then we close the gap. And I often sketch a little canyon with one person on one side and what they want on the other side, and they can't just grab it. They have to build a bridge, and that is your intentional communication.
Oh, this is beautiful, beautiful. And I can say from experience, that the term pitch is definitely somewhat problematic, right? Because it really, really conveys these images in people's minds of, well, pitching. So I love the term intentional communication. Now, you said something about knowing your goals and knowing your audience as a presentation coach. When you work with people, where do you think you spend more time with your clients? Is it finding and defining their goal, or is it more about the audience?
I think this is how I like to explain it. Can you see my Lego blocks?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah, get them
Yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah,
light.
yeah.
So yellow is your mindset.
Mhm.
Orange is your strategy. Red is your message. Blue is your performance, and green are your slides. And if you don't have a growth mindset, let's not even get started, because without the growth mindset, any feedback or any iterations or any pushback or any challenging is going to be met with a lot of resistance. And communication is an infinite game. Just when you think you get really good at communicating, the mist clears and you realize you're only halfway up the mountain. And, even people that we often cite as the greats, whether it's Steve Jobs or Martin Luther King or any of these fantastic orators, they will always be able to assess and improve themselves and say, well, I could have done this better. And so mindset is crucial. If you don't have that right mindset, go and do something else. And then once you've got your mindset, you then need to go, well, why am I presenting? What's my strategy? And that comes down to me. What do I want to get out of it? And more importantly, what does the audience get out of it? So I think the next level up, the next biggest level is the strategy. Why am I spending time getting ready to connect and communicate with other people? And so that is self speakers' goals and audiences' outcomes. So I think that is the most crucial thing. Without that, you can't really work on the message, because you could end up saying anything, but I need to talk to the people in front of me. So I think it's definitely the goals of the speaker and the audience.
Beautiful, beautiful. And yes, mindset is so important. I think, that so often we are tempted to look and work on skills and message, but where it's really, really at is the mindset. And it starts by walking out on stage. If you have that right mindset, if you are grounded, everything else falls in place so much easier. So you mentioned growth mindset. How do you help people to embrace a growth mindset if they don't already do?
I think it comes down to choices and making a choice. And am I prepared to listen? Am I willing to accept the feedback? And I think that it comes from how the feedback is sent. So if it's sent with empathy and compassion and care, and ultimately the feedback is there to make somebody else better. So that the sender of feedback needs to be really aware of how they're sending their message, and they've got to have a lot of trust. And I was in China recently visiting my wife's family, and there were lots of situations where my wife and the kids would go off with family members and do stuff, and I was in dad mode and I didn't have too much to do. So I spent a long time in ChatGPT on my phone, prompting, generating images, exploring ideas. And I would just be sat in a cafe or waiting outside a toy shop or something like that. And I created these series of images for what I believe is really important for communication. It's that classic know, like, and trust. And so I had this image of a whole grid of circles that all but one of the circles is gray and one of them is yellow. And that's no. Do I even know you exist? And then, like you, do I move the gray circles out of the way so I'm just looking at the yellow one? I give the yellow one space and time and attention. That means I like you. And then trust is when you help me start to improve. And I really believe that simple know, like, and trust. If I don't know you exist, I'm not even tuned in. I then need to like you and tune out the noise and focus on you. And then I need to commit and say, you're going to help me get my results. And I think that trust comes from what I signal as a coach or an expert to what the receiver tunes into, and they decide if they trust me. And if they don't trust me, no matter how I communicate, or the empathy or the clarity or the compassion, it's not going to make any sense. It's going to be rejected. And I think I can only do my best to control what I can, but if they choose to trust me or not, that's ultimately down to them.
Very, very good. Very good. You also just mentioned ChatGPT and AI, and it certainly has changed how we work, even as coaches, right? Because, for example, before I meet with a new client, in the past, I would go through their LinkedIn profile, I would look at their website, and today I usually take their information, perhaps website, put it into Notebook LM, and then
Mm-hmm.
generate an audio overview. And I'm not sure if you've ever tried this. This is a fascinating experience, right? Because that audio overview, then the result is a 7 to 9 minute conversation between two virtual podcast hosts that put things in words that sometimes, they are just flattering, right? And it gives you so much insight into your clients on one side, and on the other side also the words that you can use or that they can use in their, let's say, introductions about themselves. So, how are you using ChatGPT or AI tools in general? And what's one of the specific things that you do that you just couldn't even do before these tools arrived on our screens?
I use them all day, every day.
Hmm.
Um, I love it. I am cautious and aware and slightly scared, but also empowered and excited. And I it was basically beginning of this year when I really zipped on my base jumping parachute and I walked to the edge of the AI rabbit hole and I put my goggles on and I jumped. And I'm like, just base jumping down this. Most of what I listen to in podcasts is either sales or AI. A lot of what I choose to tune into on YouTube is AI related books, audio books. I think it's so potentially powerful and again scary and could be massively manipulated and used against us. Hopefully not. Um, but basically, yeah, I love it. So specifically, I'm trying to think of a good example. There are so many. So okay, here's one. I I live in a small town in the southwest of England, and I was going up to Bristol, and that means I got to drive from my house, get to the train station, park the car, get on the train, and I was running late. And then I just make the train within like a minute or two. The doors go close, beep 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 beep, close, and as soon as I get on the train, I'm like, I didn't lock the car. I was so busy, I was so rushed, I forgot to lock the car. And so I pitched myself the whole journey up, 27 minutes on the train. I kept catastrophizing and telling myself I hadn't locked the car. And I could remember everything that I had done except lock the car. And I was like, I'm about to go to a conference and I can't sit in that conference and concentrate on the speakers if I'm thinking that I haven't locked the car. And if I lose the family car, we're in a whole world of pain. And the pitch in my head to myself was getting so noisy that I decided, right, when I get off the train, I'm going to just get on the train going back and I'm going to go and check because I need peace of mind. And so I basically said, I'm going to be late to this conference by 2 hours. That's just what I'm going to have to do. And so I then got off the train, waited on the platform for 15 minutes, and then waited on the train for another 30 minutes. So I had 45 minutes of just thinking about all the decisions I'd made that morning. And I went from being, you're stupid, you're overthinking it, you should trust yourself. And I was going to, yeah, but you're doing the right thing because you need, and my mind was just crashing all over the place. And I thought, I can't handle this. So what I did was I opened my phone, went to ChatGPT and just told it what happened, typed out how I was feeling, the situation, the context, the experiences. And then I just pressed send. And I got the most amazing coaching session where it said, it's okay. This happens all the time. What you've experienced is this. And it labeled it and it cited it and
Wow.
it explained why it happened, how it happened. And I just read it and started smiling. And the pressure in my head just went as I felt understood. And I felt that I could talk to somebody. I could talk to an entity and I could get what I needed in that moment of guidance and clarity. And then the most powerful thing at the bottom, it goes, would you like me to help you come up with a strategy to avoid this next time? So I just prompted
Oh,
yes. And I
I
went,
love this story. I absolutely love this story, real world. And yes, it can be a very, very soothing tool. Absolutely. So let's get back to intentional communication, right? So you have your mindset as a basis. And the second part was the strategy, right? What do you mean by that? And how do you develop strategies for a particular talk?
so I've actually just made, we're not gonna not talk about it. I made a custom GPT. So each of my 5 levels in my intentional communication framework, I have a custom GPT. And so the orange one, the orange one, sorry, the strategy, it goes through a series of questions that says, where are you talking? Why are you talking? Who else is talking? How long do you have? Where do you feature in the lineup? And so it's asking all these sort of contextual discovery questions to get a sense of what is the context in which you are performing. And that is your strategy, really understanding why are you spending time to prepare a message to get on stage, and then where do you want the audience to be? And the best way to sort of elaborate on this, if I may, is another story of a woman I worked with, Shelley. And Shelley messaged me one morning. She said, I have an opportunity tonight to have 3 minutes on stage talking to a room of industry experts in her niche. Now, Shelley's expertise is lighting. Like, how does light affect us, whether it's artificial light or natural light, to our health and our well-being? And she was talking to lighting manufacturers, suppliers, buyers, sellers, showrooms. So she was talking to her niche. And she said, I don't want to miss this opportunity. I need it to be the best thing it can be. I said, great, let's have a coaching call. And so we started off the call. I said, what are you planning to say? And she only had 3 minutes. What she planned to say was 6 minutes. And I asked her, I said, do you believe what you're sharing is useful for you? She sort of didn't really have an answer. And I said, well, can I tell you what I'm hearing? She said, yes, please. And I said, well, I'm hearing a very qualified, clever professional go into a room with other equally qualified professionals, and you're telling them what you know. And that is going to create a barrier, because they're going to be, really? I don't want someone to tell me what I know, because I've read a different report and I've done a different MBA and I've done a different PhD and I see it differently. So I'm going to, I'm going to put up a barrier. And I was like, that's not going to serve you. That's not a good strategical move. You need to come up with something different. And just that conversation, she sparked, as she went, oh my God. And she started telling me a different story that ultimately got her. Now she's being paid a year and a half later. She's doing a 12 country tour of Europe, being paid to curate events and put on events and speakers. She's selling her book and she's building her LinkedIn profile. So
Oh,
strategically, what did she want to achieve? She didn't
yeah.
need to prove her expertise. She wanted to build her influence and her network and her professional value.
Beautiful. What a great, great example, Martin. That's truly a solid and sound strategy that you've helped her to develop here. So let's move up the Lego blocks, level 3, 2, and 1. Talk to me about, how does it continue?
So you read his message.
Okay.
So once you've figured out your strategy, why are you spending this time to prepare a talk? What is it that you're going to share that's going to make that strategy happen? Um, and what again, I've got a custom GPT for this, where it asks you, how do you like to think? And so very recently, what I've started to do is just talk to ChatGPT with the audio function, and I'll just sort of, I call it fire hose. I just empty my head of whatever's in my head, a bit like when I was on the train consoling myself about, did I lock the car or not? So you can just talk at it. And then there's another method I've heard, and I use it a lot, where I'm saying, I ask ChatGPT to ask me 5 clarifying questions one by one that helps it understand my goals and ultimately helps me look at my problem. And then I was doing a coaching session, and this fantastic woman stood up and pitched her business, and she was really good. And I went, how do you prepare? She goes, oh, I just write 3 or 4 bullet points on a piece of paper and then I improvise off that. I was like, wow, that's really strong. So I put that concept into the custom GPT. And then another person in that coaching call said, well, I'm an academic. And what I'll do is I'm constantly refining a draft. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I put that in. And so when it comes to defining your message, your red layer, I'm like, do you want to talk to a custom GPT and just speak freely until you run out of ideas and it catches you and listens to it that way? Do you want to give it 3 bullet points and it helps you elaborate a script? Do you want to give it your iterative drafts, or do you want to be interviewed? And that, to me, is 4 really strong ways of starting to figure out what of your message will amplify your strategy.
Full framework, powerful framework. So message, and then we move into
Ta-da! Performance.
performance.
And it makes me think of those sketches that we did maybe a year and a half ago when
Hmm.
we first really connected, and you were talking about your um, on-screen personas,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I did those sketches,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that was in the online. That was the hangover of COVID. We were all really struggling with this medium, and you had this wonderful way of showing people how they turn up on screen, and that's as important as how you turn up on stage in the same room. And so the performance is it's definitely that eye contact, that voice, that posture, what you do with your hands, how you speak, and whether you have an toad.
All right. All right. Now, are you using any technology to help your clients with the performance as well?
Yes, back to ChatGPT. Yes. So I worked with a wonderful woman called Natalie, and she was in Hong Kong preparing to go to Singapore to go and talk to some fund managers. And her position as a coach, as somebody who sees the invisible. And she was somebody who's just really good at tuning into what people aren't saying. She has a Goldman Sachs 20-year career. She's now a coach with executive C-suite leaders, and she's really, really intuitive about seeing what people are trying to say but not saying. And so her spot in this conference was the last speaker of the day. And so we again analyzed her strategy. We really sort of thought about why she's speaking. And when it came to her performance, she is a perfectionist. She is a really pushes herself to be the best, and that was not what was going to help her, because it would have made her performance too rigid and too perfect. Whereas her message would connect when people could say, Natalie's just like me, but she gets me. Natalie's just another human with flaws and weaknesses, but strengths. And so we had to help Natalie step down from the pedestal of perfection and embrace and be comfortable in being really fluid. And she's somebody who would love to memorize a script. And what we did using WhatsApp was she would send me, we developed a script, and then I encouraged her to internalize that script. And the way that she would internalize it properly would by doing lots of practice. And because she was 8 hours ahead of me from the UK to Hong Kong, we were virtual. So I said, you must send me every day at least 5 WhatsApp recordings of your performance. I will take those WhatsApp recordings, transcribe them in Descript, put that transcript into our ChatGPT chat, which has all the context of this project. And again, because she embraced the rapid iteration process of the performance as we were getting close to the top of the stack of concepts, ChatGPT and myself, co-coaches, were able to give her incredible feedback. And she really, really, really improved how she performs. And there was one moment when we were going through the feedback on the call, and she called a timeout, and she goes, wow, ChatGPT really gets me. And I'm like, well, we have given it so much context, and we are scaffolding this conversation. And Natalie wasn't quite aware of how much side conversations I was having with ChatGPT about my observations of the whole process. But the three of us, Natalie, myself, and ChatGPT, were able to really provide, as we got to the top, the practice level that makes the difference. Because too many people go from, they got the mindset, they got the strategy, they have a fantastic message, they just don't have time to put the practice in. And then they get on a big stage and they don't meet their expectations because they haven't got enough muscle memory of what it's like to actually perform. They know it, they just don't know how to perform it.
Wow, this is another great, great example. I love how you're working with your clients. It's very similar. I think we're all doing the same, right? Because the focus is on the practicing and putting in those reps. And I sometimes think perhaps today it becomes almost a little bit too easy for some people, or they think it might be too easy. by just having a script made by ChatGPT that's not really in line with your own persona. Then they're throwing it onto a teleprompter if they're doing something online, and they're basically just reading a script from the teleprompter, and it couldn't be worse, right? So
Oh,
the preparation is so important to to get to that authentic self, right? Because only when you are absolutely prepared can
mm.
you leave away, and it also minimizes anxiety, and that's another topic I very very briefly want to pick up with you. In the performance area, anxiety is something that a lot of people struggle with. Do you have a one or two go-to responses if somebody comes to you and says, look, I'm just so nervous, I'm dreading that moment? What can you do?
So if we don't have any time and they are about to go and present and they express their anxiety levels, I just say breathe.
Yeah,
It's the thing that you can really control and put into practice that will help you immediately is the breathing.
yeah,
And that's from the diaphragm. It's big and slow into your lungs, through your nose. Breathe in and then hold, and then exhale twice as long as the inhale. So if it takes you 2 seconds to breathe in, 4 seconds to breathe out, and do those for a couple of minutes before you're about to step on stage, and it will really just clear the mind, help connect the mind to the body, allow you to sort of feel the moment, um, and be as controllable as possible. The second thing would be just a mental reframe. It's like you're allowed to feel something before the talk, but just
yeah.
call it anticipation instead of anxiety, because
Yes.
we anticipate with joy. It's going
Yeah,
to be fun. It's
yeah,
going to be exciting.
yeah.
We lean in, we smile. So anticipate it's going to be great, or anticipate you're allowed to feel all these chemical reactions and physical things. That's totally normal. Just call it anticipation, not anxiety, because you're promoting it as a good thing.
I
Um,
love this reframe, Martin. Absolutely love it. We are almost at the end of our 30 minutes here, and we could continue for a long, long time. I think, especially on this topic here of anxiety, because there are so many different ways to deal with it. I'd like to ask you one last question, and that is not to you as a coach, but to you as a presenter. You've been on many, many stages, you've presented a lot, and this connects back to our very, very beginning when you were talking about knowing your audience, right? What is a time that you have totally misread an audience? And what did you learn from that experience?
I remember so vividly. I was on stage at Pitch Club in China, where we would do a sort of 3-minute pitch to an audience and get feedback. And I had a slide that referenced the original Keanu Reeves, Patrick Swayze movie Point Break. And I was remember looking forward to revealing this slide that had an image and I had a line and it was all in context. And I thought it was super funny. And so I reveal the slide and I tell the punchline, and the whole room looks at me like, what? Completely like, don't get it. And I was on stage and I was like, what do you mean you don't get it? And then I looked at them and I'm like, yeah, you're half my age. You didn't grow up like me in the 90s watching this every Saturday with my mates. I'm 45, you're 22, right? That was a real lesson in understanding that because it makes sense to me doesn't mean it makes sense to my audience, and I can't assume they're going to get it. And so ever since that moment, I've been hyper aware of, are the references that I'm using relevant to the people in the room? And so two more quick examples. The second one, so I used a Star Wars example, and I made the assumption that everybody's watched Star Wars. No, they haven't. I did a thing and I mentioned, and someone put their hands up and I go, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't watched Star Wars.
Yep. Yep.
So, that was a reminder. And then last week I was I was doing the pitch session for some 14-year-olds at school doing work experience. And I was so conscious of not sounding like the old out of touch guy who's trying to sound cool to the young people, and trying to get my references and trying to frame them in a way that was on their terms and not mine. I don't know if it worked, because teenagers don't give you any feedback. They don't give you any visual cues. They just sit there with an expression of like, who's this old dude? I was like, I really hope this landed. So yeah, you got to think from
Lovely.
their perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. And time moves on, and our references again, might not land anymore. So very, very cool. Hey, Martin, thank you so much for this engaging conversation. You have truly, truly provided so much value. Your model it makes super, super sense. I'm glad you had the Lego blocks next to you, because nothing like a
Always.
visualization made with Legos, and that is pretty timeless anyway. So thank you for taking the time for this engaging conversation, and thanks to our audience for watching us. And with that, I wish you all a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see each other next time. Bye bye.
Fantastic.